Hey everyone, let's have a look at the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak 14486. Now this particular example is about 30 years old and is a two-tone example, but there are other examples of course in steel and also in gold. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at a basic background to the Royal Oak, then I'll talk about this model, and throughout I'll talk about things you're going to want to look for when you're buying one of these on the used market. Alright, so as a bit of background to the Royal Oak, it was one of the first watches that was bridging the gap between a luxury watch and a sports watch. It did this by having an integrated bracelet and a bracelet that was made out of steel in the original version. This contrasts with many luxury watches that didn't have such an integrated steel bracelet. Now this was coming out from a luxury watch designer, hence why I was able to bridge that gap. Another unique feature of it was the unique face shape. In this case it's octagonal, which was quite unique for the time when many watches were round or of traditional shapes. So it was quite a unique and interesting watch at the time. It obviously gave rise to other watches that Gerard Gent was also involved with, such as Bulgari and the Patek Philippe Nautilus, in addition to myriad other watches and other copycats. So it's been a very copied design over the time. It's been iconic and very classic, and also has been very popular. So let's have a look at some things that you might want to look for when looking at these watches. We'll start with the face. So if you look at the face, as I indicated, it has this octagonal design. The octagonal design is quite nice, it's quite unique, but it has been copied quite a lot. Other things to look for with this face are the raised or quasi-raised face and dial of the watch. This really arises in part because of the nature of the face and also because of the patina that arises as the watch ages, which creates this quite nice and quite unique bump-type pattern. So it is a relatively unique and interesting pattern there. The other things to watch out for are the octagonal bezel, for want of a better word, itself. So what you'll notice on this particular version is there's quite a lot of scratches. That's really arisen because this watch has been worn daily, but you'll notice that scratches are obviously going to devalue the watch. Other things you'll want to watch out for, though, are that if the watch isn't scratched, then what you'll often find is it's been excessively polished. Excessive polishing has a couple of effects. Firstly, it's going to somewhat remove the octagonal nature of the face. The other thing it might do is if you have a look at the side of the watch, you'll notice that what you really want is sharp edges. If you remove the sharp edges, which could arise through excessive polishing, it obviously can lose some of its character. So you're going to want to balance the issue with scratches versus the issues that arise if there's excessive polishing and trying to avoid some of those issues. The other problem with excessive polishing is if you notice these screws on the face, obviously the excessive polishing can remove some of the three-dimensional nature of those. So in reality, with a number of these watches, watch owners have this balancing act of trying to remove scratches without polishing too much. And when you're buying one of these watches, you're going to want to look out for those things. Scratches, and whether the watch is octagonal, and whether those sharp edges still exist. You'll also want to look out for the face, and you want to look out for this particular face in the dial here as to whether it has that three-dimensional patina, which is quite attractive in reality. It's one of those ones where, interestingly, the watch has aged quite well because of that patina. Another thing to look for here is the Audemars Piguet logo itself. Now that in this case is at the 12 o'clock level, but in some other versions it's going to be at about 6 o'clock, where the automatic is written in this particular model. It doesn't really matter greatly in the grand scheme of things where it is, but in more modern versions it's going to be at 12 o'clock. Now obviously whether it's at 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock doesn't matter per se. What really matters is of course the version of the watch. In many cases the 6 o'clock versions are some of the older and in some cases more desirable versions, but of course it really depends on the actual model itself. Okay, so with that in mind we can move through to the rest of the case. If you look at the back of the case, there's nothing hugely interesting there. There's obviously the Royal Oak lettering, and then you'll have a serial number below, and you'll also have some screws at the back. That would give you the impression it's relatively easy to remove the mechanism. In reality, it's not that straightforward, so it's not going to be the most easy one to just take apart. So that's, I guess, to some extent good in terms of avoiding Frankenstein watches, but nevertheless, you will have those screws. Alright, so then let's move on to the bracelet itself. So the bracelet here is two-tone. Something to watch out for is you want the bracelet to match the face. So if the bracelet doesn't match, then obviously you have an issue there. You'll want it to match. Here, because it's two-tone, the bracelet is two-tone. If you've got a steel watch, the bracelet will be steel. Similarly, if it's gold watch, the bracelet's going to be gold. Alright, the bracelet itself is quite attractive It does feel quite solid but not excessively heavy, and it feels like it's relatively high quality as compared to some of the more low quality bracelets that sometimes arise. So it is actually quite a high quality bracelet with a nice feel to it. The clasp itself is relatively unsurprising here. Given that this is an older version, the clasp is not particularly exciting or unique. It functions much like an ordinary Rolex clasp. You do it up as per normal. It has an AP logo on the clasp itself, but that again is relatively unsurprising. Again, things to watch out for here are excessive scratches. Because this has been worn on a daily basis, scratches have arisen. That's not terribly surprising, but obviously scratches do devalue a watch, so you're going to want to pay less, of course, if there are scratches and you're buying the watch. So with that in mind, the question is this a good watch to buy? And is it a good watch from an investment perspective and just a general wearing perspective? So in terms of general wear, the watch is actually quite hardy. It's quite a good daily watch in my experience. In terms of what it goes with clothes-wise, it's relatively flexible, so it's that nice watch that bridges fashion and sports watches, so it's quite a nice watch in that respect. In terms of investment, which is what probably a lot of people are interested in, the question is this a good investment? To some extent it is, in that it's not terribly expensive. You'll obviously get these for under 10,000 US, so it's going to be quite cost effective when you compare it to other watches such as Rolex's. Now clearly comparing a used watch and a new watch is not exactly accurate, but the question is, would you rather a used Audemars Piguet or a new Rolex? And that's a question that each individual will have to make up for themselves, or come up with an answer for themselves. But it is relatively good value given the brand recognition and given the price point it comes in with. So it's a good entry-level Audemars Piguet. Now clearly you're going to want to look for the automatic version. This particular model is 36mm in case diameter. Now obviously the larger the better in general terms, without it becoming excessively large. Like I said, this is 36mm. You'll sometimes find versions that are 30mm. Sometimes you'll find versions that are quartz. You're going to want to avoid either quartz or excessively small watches. They'll again be more difficult to shift on the market, and obviously they'll be less desirable. Alright, so with that in mind, the question is this a good investment? The answer is, it generally is going to hold value. My watch has held value since I bought it. Generally, the watch prices for these are relatively stable, so it's not going to be a terrible investment. You probably won't see these soaring in price anytime soon, but they're probably going to hold value. They're going to look reasonably nice, and they'll represent good value as a watch that you might want to wear. So I hope this video has been useful to you. I hope it's given you some insight into the Audemars Piguet, and in particular the 14486 model, but just the models in general, what to look out for with them, and some of the unique features such as the face, the octagonal shape, and the avoidance of this shape being removed through excessive polishing, while also balancing the need to try to avoid scratches, and the niceness to some extent of the patina on the face itself. So thanks so much for listening in. I do hope you found the video interesting, and if you have, it would be great if you clicked the like and subscribe buttons, and I do hope to see you next time. Bye.